For a long time, I believed that the worst possible outcome in investing was losing money. Watching numbers go down, seeing red instead of green, feeling that sharp, immediate pain when a decision clearly went wrong and you could point to it on a chart. That kind of loss felt obvious, measurable, and at least honest. You knew when it happened and you knew what it cost you. What I did not understand back then was that there is a quieter loss, one that does not show up on statements, does not trigger panic, and does not force immediate action. It looks harmless in real time. It feels survivable. Sometimes it even feels responsible. That loss is time, and by the time you realize you lost it, there is nothing you can do to get it back. I did not blow up an account. I did not gamble everything on a bad bet. I did not chase obvious scams or ignore basic rules. On paper, I did many things correctly. I avoided disasters. I stayed disciplined. I followed strategies that sounded intelligent and reasonable. That is exactly why it took me so long to see what was happening. Money losses announce themselves. Time losses disguise themselves as patience, caution, and prudence. They tell you that you are doing the right thing, just not seeing results yet. They convince you that waiting longer is maturity, not delay. Years can disappear that way. At the beginning, everything feels productive. You are learning, setting things up, building systems, refining strategies. Even small progress feels meaningful because it is new. You track your decisions carefully. You read, you watch, you analyze. You feel engaged. Then the learning phase ends, but the waiting phase does not. Your actions become repetitive. Your strategy becomes familiar. The excitement fades, and what remains is routine. That is when time starts slipping through unnoticed. You are still doing something, so it does not feel like stagnation, but nothing materially changes. I remember telling myself that slow progress was better than mistakes, that avoiding losses was a form of winning, that consistency would eventually be rewarded, even if it did not feel like it now. All of those statements were technically true and deeply misleading. Avoiding losses does not automatically create gains. Preserving capital does not guarantee progress. And consistency without direction can quietly lock you into mediocrity. The dangerous part was that nothing felt wrong enough to fix. My portfolio was not collapsing. My decisions were not obviously flawed. I was not under pressure to change, so I stayed. Looking back, I can see how many decisions were shaped by fear that disguised itself as discipline. I avoided volatility because it felt reckless. I avoided concentration because it felt irresponsible. I avoided bold moves because they felt unnecessary. Every avoidance felt smart in isolation. Together, they produced inertia. Time passed. Markets moved. Opportunities appeared and disappeared. I stayed busy maintaining positions that were technically fine, but strategically stagnant. I was not losing money, but I was losing years of compounding that would never come back. That realization hurt more than any temporary drawdown ever did. Money losses hurt immediately, but they teach quickly. Time losses teach slowly, if at all. They let you believe everything is fine until the math finally becomes impossible to ignore. I realized this when I started running scenarios instead of tracking recent performance. Not week to week, not year to year, but decade to decade. I asked myself what would happen if I kept doing exactly what I was doing, without change, without improvement, without reassessment. The answer was uncomfortable. I was not failing, but I was also not arriving anywhere meaningful. The trajectory was flat enough that even small changes in direction would have mattered enormously if I had made them earlier. That is when it became clear that time is not just an input in investing. It is the most fragile resource you have. You can recover from financial losses with effort, skill, and luck. You cannot recover from years spent waiting for something that was never designed to happen. Another hard truth surfaced when I looked at opportunity cost honestly. Every choice I made did not just have a return, it had an alternative. While I was protecting myself from downside, other paths were compounding quietly. Not perfectly, not smoothly, but meaningfully. I had chosen comfort over trajectory. Comfort feels safe in the moment. It rarely feels costly until much later. The longer I stayed in strategies that did not challenge me, the harder it became to change. Not because changing was risky, but because admitting lost time is painful. It forces you to confront the idea that patience was not always wisdom, and caution was not always intelligence. That is a difficult admission for disciplined people. People talk a lot about losing money in bad investments. They talk less about losing time in acceptable ones. Assets that neither collapse nor compound meaningfully. Strategies that protect you from mistakes while also protecting you from progress. Those are the most dangerous because they never force a decision. Time loss often comes from being technically correct but strategically wrong. From optimizing for the wrong goal. From focusing on stability when growth was required or growth when resilience was required. In my case, I optimized for not being wrong. I wanted to avoid embarrassment, regret, and visible mistakes. What I did not see was that invisibility itself was the mistake. I also underestimated how quickly time accelerates. Early years feel slow, mid-years blur together. Later years arrive suddenly, and you realize how little room remains for course correction. Money can be replaced with effort, time cannot. Another realization hit when I looked at behavior under pressure. When unexpected expenses came up, when life demanded flexibility, I noticed how often my money was technically there, but practically unavailable. Locked in structures that required time to unwind or patience to realize value. That illiquidity cost me options. It forced compromises. It made decisions heavier than they needed to be. Those costs were not dramatic. They were cumulative. Time loss also came from waiting for perfect clarity, waiting for confirmation, waiting for certainty that never arrives in real systems. The market does not reward certainty. It rewards action under uncertainty. I spent too long confusing careful analysis with readiness. There is a point where additional thinking no longer improves outcomes. It only delays them. I crossed that point without noticing. Another uncomfortable truth was that some of my strategies were designed for someone else's timeline, not mine. Advice that works brilliantly for one stage of life can quietly sabotage another. I followed frameworks that made sense in theory, but did not align with my actual goals, energy, or constraints. I borrowed timelines without questioning them. Time loss also came from underestimating the compounding of skills. While money sat still, skills could have been built. While I waited for returns, I could have been increasing my ability to create them. Instead, I treated investing as something separate from personal growth, rather than an extension of it. That separation cost me leverage. One of the hardest moments was realizing that I could have afforded to lose some money earlier, but I could not afford to lose those years. Small financial losses early would have been cheap tuition. Avoiding them entirely turned into expensive delay. There is a strange comfort in knowing you did not lose money. It lets you believe you were safe. It lets you believe nothing went wrong. That belief is seductive, and it is dangerous. Because nothing going wrong is not the same as something going right. When I finally accepted that time was the real loss, my perspective shifted. I stopped asking how to avoid mistakes and started asking how to make progress measurable, not in short-term returns, but in trajectory. Was I moving somewhere or just maintaining a position? That question changes everything. It forces you to examine whether your strategy actually fits your life or whether it simply feels respectable. It forces you to confront whether patience is serving you or hiding from decisions you are afraid to make. I also realized that time loss affects confidence differently than money loss. Losing money can shake your confidence briefly, but recovering builds resilience. Losing time quietly erodes confidence over years because you start doubting your instincts without knowing why. You did not fail, but you also did not win. That limbo is corrosive. Once I saw that clearly, I became far less afraid of making visible mistakes. I became more afraid of invisible stagnation. I accepted that some losses are acceptable if they buy clarity, momentum, and direction. I stopped treating time as something abundant and money as something scarce. The reality is the opposite. Money is renewable, time is not. The worst part is that time loss rarely feels dramatic. It feels reasonable. It feels justified. It feels like waiting one more year will not matter, until it does. By the time you see it, the window has shifted. I did not lose money. I lost the chance for those years to compound, to teach, to position me differently. That loss cannot be undone. It can only be learned from. If there is one lesson worth internalizing, it is this: the absence of pain is not proof of progress. Comfort is not confirmation. And avoiding loss is not the same as building something. Time rewards movement, not perfection. Once I understood that, I stopped treating investing as a place to hide from mistakes and started treating it as a place to express intent. That shift did not eliminate risk, but it eliminated regret. Because losing money can be painful, losing time is permanent, and that is worse.